What if one finance minister bought Nigeria time? Ngozi Okonjo Iweala did, by rewriting the math that ruled the state. This film starts where she flips the script and makes numbers serve Nigerians again. When debt runs the country, not voters, Ngozi breaks the spell. Power doesn't always march in with flags, it seeps in through spreadsheets, deadlines, repayments, choices pre-spent before cabinets even meet. That quiet arithmetic of debt narrows a nation's future, until someone like Ngozi Okonjo Iweala exposes the math, restores control, and reopens Nigeria's options. In the early 2000s, Nigeria was not a state on the verge of collapse. From the outside, the machinery of a nation was in motion. It was constrained. Oil, the lifeblood of the economy, was being extracted and exported. Budgets, the blueprints for national progress, were being passed in parliament. Elections, the very symbol of democratic will, were being held. Yet, beneath this surface of normalcy, a deep financial hemorrhage was underway. A significant portion of the national income wasn't being invested in schools, hospitals, or infrastructure. It was flowing outward, a relentless tide of capital to service decades of accumulated foreign debt. The nation was running, but it was running in place. It was in this environment that Ngozi Okonjo Iweala returned to Nigeria to serve as finance minister. With a formidable career at the World Bank, she understood something many did not see with such clarity. She saw that the most profound act of liberation wouldn't come from a political revolution, but from a fiscal one. Before a country can build a grander future, before it can truly expand its horizons and fulfill its people's aspirations, it must first reclaim sovereign control of its present. This is Africa unrestricted. The power was not in the headlines but hidden in the balance sheets. No drumroll, just cell formulas. Now let's meet the person who reads those cells like a map to freedom. When Ngozi Okonjo Iweala became finance minister, she wasn't an outsider. She was returning with a playbook. Her years as a vice president at the World Bank had provided a front-row seat to the inner workings of global finance. She had seen firsthand how creditor institutions think, how they assess risk, and what unspoken rules govern their decisions. She understood the psychology of the negotiating table, the subtle pressures and the critical importance of precedent. She had witnessed how debt negotiations unfold, not as simple accounting exercises, but as intricate ballets of leverage. She saw how repayment structures could lock in specific policy behaviors for decades, effectively outsourcing a nation's economic choices. And crucially, she understood that countries don't lose their sovereignty in a single moment of crisis. They lose it gradually, in 1,000 quiet concessions. Armed with this knowledge, her first priority was not grand promises of immediate growth. Her initial urgent focus was more fundamental, to restore Nigeria's room to maneuver. This meant reclaiming the fiscal and policy space to make sovereign decisions, free from the chokehold of creditor demands. Without the ability to set your own agenda, you are forever reacting to theirs. At the time, Nigeria's external debt was a staggering $30 billion. The sheer weight of it was crushing. Servicing these obligations consumed a vast portion of government revenue, money desperately needed for hospitals, roads, and schools. For many, this debt was an unchangeable fact of life. The conventional wisdom was to treat it as a chronic condition, something to be managed quietly, but never challenged or cured. But Okonjo Iweala read the situation entirely differently. Where others saw only a debilitating liability, she saw latent leverage. She understood a core principle of international finance: scale creates relevance. A small debtor in trouble is a problem for the debtor, but a massive debtor, a country the size and strategic importance of Nigeria, is a problem for the creditors. A debtor of that significance cannot simply be ignored or allowed to fail without causing wider systemic ripples. This relevance, she knew, could be converted into a negotiation space. But it required a crucial catalyst: credibility. To be taken seriously, Nigeria had to demonstrate it was a reliable partner, capable of managing its own affairs with transparency and discipline. It meant building a coherent economic plan and backing it up with verifiable data. This was the key to transforming the conversation from a supplicant asking for relief to a serious partner proposing a viable solution. Her next step was to build the credibility to start clearing that room. Her strategy was a masterclass in sequencing. She understood that to bargain effectively abroad, you must first build credibility at home. The decision was to align domestic reform with external negotiation, creating a powerful feedback loop. This wasn't just about asking for help, it was about proving Nigeria was a reliable partner in its own recovery. The first steps were internal: strengthen transparency through clear, auditable financial reporting, signal fiscal discipline by reining in wasteful expenditure, and demonstrating a commitment to living within the nation's means. The message was unequivocal: we are serious about reform with or without your help. This demonstrated seriousness at home before demanding relief abroad. The structural consequence was profound. It repositioned Nigeria from a passive supplicant debtor, perpetually caught in a cycle of rescheduling, to a structured, proactive negotiator. The country was no longer just a line item on a creditor's balance sheet. It was an agent with a plan, armed with data and a demonstrated track record of reform. This shift in posture changed the entire dynamic of the conversation. Negotiating a reset. With this newfound leverage, the team approached the Paris Club, a powerful group of official creditors. The negotiations were intense, but Nigeria's case was compelling. In 2005, they secured a landmark agreement. It was the largest debt relief package for an African nation at the time. Roughly $30 billion of external debt was addressed. This wasn't a simple write-off. It was a carefully structured deal involving outright cancellation, buybacks, and final repayments, ultimately wiping the slate clean. Crucially, she did not frame this as victory theater. There were no grand parades. Instead, she framed it as reset capacity. A victory lap implies the race is over. A reset implies the real work is just beginning. The goal wasn't just to eliminate old debt, but to prevent the accumulation of new, unsustainable obligations. This meant establishing post-relief safeguards, like fiscal responsibility laws, to lock in the gains. Debt relief in itself did not create prosperity. It created breathing room. It freed up nearly $1 billion a year in debt service payments, funds that could now be redirected towards health, education, and infrastructure. This breathing room expands choice. It allows a nation to move from reactive crisis management to proactive long-term planning. Great, we've found air. Now let's stop poking holes in the boat. The next challenge was to build a buffer against the biggest hole of all, the volatility of oil prices. Her decision after the agreement was not expansionary spending, it was consolidation. Without discipline, relief evaporates. The structural consequence was fiscal space that could be redirected toward development priorities, designing shock absorbers before the crisis. Nigeria's dependence on oil revenue had long created volatility. When prices rose, spending expanded. When prices fell, deficits widened. Okonjo Iweala interpreted this pattern as a structural flaw rather than unfortunate timing. Her response was to support mechanisms that would stabilize revenue across cycles, save during high prices, cushion during downturns. This approach was not politically comfortable. Saving money during abundance rarely attracts applause, but her decision reflected long-term thinking. Build buffers before the next shock arrives. The structural consequence was an attempt to reduce fiscal fragility, though durability would depend on political continuity. Embedding transparency as leverage, reform threatened existing interests, fiscal tightening reduces discretionary power, anti-corruption measures disrupt established networks. Okonjo Iweala did not escalate rhetorically, she embedded reform inside institutional frameworks. Budget processes became more transparent, reporting standards strengthened, external credibility increased. Her interpretation was clear: transparency is not moral decoration, it is leverage. It strengthens negotiation position both domestically and internationally. The structural consequence was incremental institutional strengthening, constrained but real, expanding the arena of influence. Later, when she became Director General of the World Trade Organization, her operating environment shifted from national finance to global trade governance. She interpreted global trade rules as another layer shaping African economic constraint. Tariff structures, supply chains, and dispute mechanisms influence domestic outcomes whether African states participate actively or not. Her decision was to operate inside that system rather than critique it from the margins. The structural consequence was African institutional presence within global trade negotiations, which alters perception and bargaining dynamics even if it does not automatically shift outcomes. What held and what strained. Bardans wipe up the testan. What held in her approach was sequencing: restore fiscal space first, build stabilizers second, strengthen institutions third. What strained was political durability. Institutional reform depends on continuity beyond individual tenure. Without sustained alignment, frameworks weaken. Her story does not demonstrate that technocrats can override politics. It demonstrates that technocrats can widen the state's margin for decision-making if political space allows it. What her story teaches us: her story teaches us that sovereignty is fiscal before it is rhetorical. A state negotiating under heavy debt pressure negotiates from limitation. What can be emulated is disciplined sequencing. Reclaim breathing room, institutionalize restraint, strengthen transparency, expand decision space before expanding ambition. What should not be assumed is that technical competence alone secures transformation. Institutional reform must survive political cycles to matter. Africa's power does not grow only through industry or mobilization. It grows when states regain the arithmetic control that allows them to decide rather than react.